Rashid, please can you move to the first slide? Okay, I think we'll kick off. Welcome everyone to our session on CWRA Lagos, a stakeholder-led approach to water security. If you just go to the next slide, Rashid, please. So this is a session co-organised between Arup and the Resilient Water Accelerator. Throughout the session, we'll be taking your questions and collecting them using this Menti code. So this will show up at the beginning of each speaker slide. So if you can just scan this QR code or enter these digits into Menti, we'll be able to collect your questions. We have a few different exciting speakers lined up for you today. And so I'm going to start by passing to Kunle Adebayo.
Thank you very much, Kirsten, and good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. My name is Kunle Adebayo. I'm the country director for Arup in Nigeria, and this session is to discuss the amazing work that is being done with regards to water in Lagos in particular. Next slide, please. I think those who attended the sessions yesterday are obviously very familiar with the trend of discussion, particularly with regards to the challenges being faced globally. Certainly, Lagos has its own fair share, and the previous slide, if you just go back, just shows a lot of the basic challenges that we face, which is Lagos has too little water, as we'll show later, too much, too dirty. So significant amounts of problems over the years. Next slide, please. From our findings, we have data, and it shows, I think the key one here, apart from the fact that Lagos is low-lying, it's a low-lying coastal city, so it's threatened significantly. But I think the big highlight here is that 90% of the population of Lagos do not have access to piped water. So it's a significant problem, both in terms of access to water and, of course, overall resilience. Next slide, please. So we, in particular in Lagos, we've over the years, even up to the last few days, we have significant shocks and stresses, and really, some will predict that Lagos is really in danger of significant difficulties in the future. So we do realize that as much as water may not be always the sexy thing to discuss, it is absolutely paramount that we get some solutions. Next slide, please. So this led to the City Water Resilience Approach, an Arup-led initiative with a very systematic approach to it. I won't have the time to go right through it, but ultimately it's the various processes to understand the system, to assess it, develop a plan, and then implement, and then finally evaluate, learn, and research. But I will say that this particular session today is specifically linked to the significance of collaboration and partnership, as we will discuss very quickly. Next slide, please. So the CWRA has actually been successfully implemented in various up to 17 or so cities, and these are all around the globe. Next slide, please. And these are some of the partners and collaborators that have been involved. Next slide, please. So what have we learned in Lagos? Hitherto, there have been very varied success, limited success to a large extent in terms of water projects. And we find that this is primarily because there's not enough attention paid to it, and it's not really effective enough. The CWRA identifies the fact that we need to bring all parties to the table, collaboration. And that collaboration will be the private sector, the investors, government, and all stakeholders. And we're finding that that has brought about significant improvement. Various projects are now on the table, and we're realizing that this is certainly the way to go. The slide here just shows the journey so far, and it shows that even in the period between 2016 to 2022, significant amount of progress has been made, various publications done, the Sponge City launch. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, something seems to have stopped. So significantly, I will say, I'm not sure I can see the slide, but the key thing that we have been able to demonstrate is that by bringing all the stakeholders together, we're getting significant success, significant attention from the state government. In July 2024, we actually signed the LWP, which is the Lagos Water Partnership, which is a very, very innovative approach to bringing all stakeholders around the table. And as my colleagues will be demonstrating in the next few sessions, we are realizing a lot of progress. So I will simply conclude by saying that a stakeholder-led approach, as prescribed by the CWRA, is really making headrooms, and we are at least now on the journey to making Lagos a city where our water resilience should be able to be achieved, and access to clean water for more of the population should be also in the near future. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand you over back to Kirsten or to Nimot. Thank you.
Thanks, Kunle. Yeah, next we're going to hear from Nimot Mully, who's an associate at our OurWater Lagos office, who's going to talk about how the CWRA process can help us baseline city resilience. So over to you, Nimot.
Yeah, thank you, Christine, and thank you, Kunle, for laying a very robust background to the CWRA.
Respects to the Sami people, the traditional peoples, country that we made onto that.
Thank you very much, Kunle, for laying such a robust background. My name is Nimot Mully. I manage the Climate and Sustainability Service portfolio in the OurWater Lagos, Nigeria office. Next slide. Yeah, so I'll be taking us through the CWRA, our water tool. The water tool has 5 stages, and is an input, is a tool that has been used in the course of in the CWRA process. So the first stage of the CWRA process using the water tool is that we did in Lagos. It involves understanding the system in the sense that there are various initiatives that have been taken in the past, policies that have been developed, and all sorts of infrastructure that is currently existing. So the first stage is to understand the system that is existing, which require gathering all available studies, reports, various information that various stakeholders have worked in that relates to the water system. With this information gathering, we gained a comprehensive understanding of the water system, including aspects of leadership, finance, infrastructure, and demography. So using the OurWater tool, we also mapped the various stakeholders identified during the process corresponding to water assets. Next slide. So the OurWater tool maps natural resources, as can be seen on the left-hand side of your screen, depending on where you're looking at. So the tool help us to map the natural resources, man-made assets, stakeholders, and their interdependencies. So with that, we're able to correlate who does what or who is doing what. Next slide, please. So with the understanding the system, it brings out all the various stakeholders. As you can see, some have 2, some have 3, and we're able to see where the interdependencies of the critical stakeholders using the OurWater tool. Next slide. So after that, we go to the second stage, which is the assess the urban resilience. So after identifying the various stakeholders, both high, middle, at the bottom of the pyramid, we were able to engage them so that we're able to assess the urban water resilience. And the picture on the screen shows one of the sessions that we had for 2 days. We brainstormed with various stakeholders, the funders, the users, the government agencies, and we came up with a robust outcome. Next slide. So the next stage is to develop an action. Sorry, the water tool has 4 dimensions. So the assessment with the engagement with the stakeholders, we have using the wheel, there are 4 dimensions to the assessment. 3 goals were assessed, 12 goals were assessed, and 63 indicators were also assessed during the assessment. Next slide. So one prominent one is the leadership and stakeholders. So in the course of assess the workshop in Lagos, under the leadership, one of the critical things that came out is the lack of understanding of a government level of how local knowledge can be included in decision-making around water issues, and also overlapping responsibilities. So in terms of leadership, I mean, some level of gaps were assessed, and for some areas there were some ministries that have overlapping responsibilities. So that sometimes leads to double taxation. Also, under one of the assessments is the health and well-being. The lack of communities local communities in Lagos, such as an informal settlements, have unique needs and challenges that must be considered in developing projects. So, I mean, because of the variety of the typology and typography of the various water stakeholders in Lagos, it shows that the assessment shows that some local communities in Lagos, such as the informal settlements, have their own unique needs, and there is no insufficient water sanitation to actually serve them. Next slide. So another aspect is the planning and finance. During the session, we observed that the water sector suffers a lot of lack of investment, because when there are too many interdependencies, you sometimes really don't know where to start, who to engage with, and it affects how investment should be done, how revenue can be generated to also serve the needs of the various communities. Next slide. Then the last but not the least is the infrastructure and the ecosystem. You know, we observed that about 50% of Lagos residents depend on monitored and unregulated water. because the sector is not properly regulated. Next slide. So for some other cities that similar tools have been used to assess, like Muzanze, Miami, and Cape Town, this is the outcome of the assessment. And just take a good look at the coloration of the outcome of the assessment. You can see a lot of yellow, green, and a few red. Let's look at what the assessment of Lagos is. Next slide. So in assessing Lagos, there are a lot of red coloration, which shows a deficiency or a defect or a lack of, a low scoring basically. So that shows the level of work that needs to be done to improve the water system in Lagos. Next. So I hope that calls for action and be able to enable us move in developing a more robust and resilient water system for Lagos. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nima. That was a really interesting view of how the CWRA process can be used. Next, we're going to pass to Omobolane Magbagiola, who is the Deputy Director of the Water Resources Department at the Office of Drainage Services and Water Resources in the Ministry of Environment and Water Resources in Lagos, Nigeria, and is also an IHE Delft alumnus. So, Omobolane, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you very much, Christine. Yes, for the Lagos, my name is Omobolane Magbagiola, and I think you could just call me Bola, the 4 letters in the middle of my name. It's okay. So next slide, please. Yeah. For me, the Ministry of Environment, going by what Nimot just said, that there are challenges going by the coloration, but I can tell you that from last year till this year, there has been so much improvement. And so for the Ministry of Environment and Water Resources, we now have a vibrant leadership, someone who is active, who is the Honorable Commissioner of the Ministry, in person of Mr. Tokunbo Wahab. He is a legal professional, so and he understands. And the ministry has a vision to create a resilient water system that gives access to clean and safe water through innovation, collaboration, preservation, and development of infrastructure in the water sector, as well as environmental management. There are 2 offices in the Ministry of Environment. You have the Office of Environmental Services that takes care of the environmental management aspect and protection of the environment, while the other one is where I am, that's the Office of Drainage Services and Water Resources. Next slide, please. So yes, going by the visioning workshop that took place last year in July, so many issues were actually identified from the problems that have been highlighted by Nimot in our own presentation. Can we go to next slide? Yeah, about 20 challenges were actually identified. The visioning workshop that took place, we had about 20 problems that were actually identified. And then as a way forward, the assessment workshop took place thereafter in October, thereabout, where the way forward, the implementation plan, and then the need to form an alliance with the private sectors was also identified. Next slide. Part of the challenges that were identified in the water sector has to do with the issue of bankability, that you don't have enough finance in the water sector in Lagos, but something is being done in that regard as at present right now. And then you have the issue of lack of data in terms of the policy, also some issues, policy issues that actually arise between one MDA's conflict in MDA's roles and responsibility, and all of those. Next slide. Yes. Thank you. So for the visioning workshop, all of these are stated in this slide, where those things that were actually identified: insufficient data to support bankability of projects. You have then the unfriendly legal framework, but thank God we now have a commissioner who is a legal professional who is now taking charge of that particular aspect. Next slide. Next slide. Hello. Next slide. Yes. Thank you. So in resolving some, next slide, please. Can we just go down? Next slide. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yes. In implementing the problems they were actually identified in the visioning workshop last year and the way forward in the assessment workshop, at present, the Lagos State government has signed into law the Lagos Wash Policy that has actually addressed the issue of conflict in the roles and responsibilities of the water sector MDA. And then it has also resolved the problem of overlapping of roles and responsibility. That's the watch policy. It has been signed, and the copies has also been are being sent out to all the MDAs in the water sector as at present right now. Also, the Lagos Water Partnership Forum has also been inaugurated in July, whereby you now have the private sector partnership in the Lagos water sector. You have the investors, you have the financiers coming together with the government MDAs to chart a way forward. And we have actually had the first meeting of this particular partnership in the month of August. Yes, about 2 weeks ago, we had the first meeting, and then we are charting, a way forward for the Lagos water sector. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that super interesting talk. Next, we're going to pass to Philip Abosi, who's the Country Director of the Resilient Water Accelerator, and he's going to talk to us about the work that the Resilient Water Accelerator has been doing in Lagos and how that has turned into a Lagos Water Partnership.
Thank you very much, Christine, and to the previous speakers as well. My name is Obose Philip. I am the country coordinator of the Resilient Water Accelerator in Lagos, Nigeria. Next slide, please. Okay, now I will briefly give you an intro of what the Resilient Water Accelerator is all about, and then take some time to just describe to you an initiative, a partnership that was bettered out of the Resilient Water Accelerator that has been established in Lagos State now, which is the Lagos Water Partnership, and that's exactly what the previous speaker had mentioned. Now, the Resilient Water Accelerator is a new initiative, a global initiative that is designed to increase the flow of public and private finance into water resilience projects. And the purpose or rationale behind this is to be able to improve the water and climate resilience of the most vulnerable communities around the world. The RWA has a target of improving the water resilience of climate vulnerable people, a target of about 50 million people by 2030. And the approach that we are deploying to solving this big, huge problem of water resilience and climate resilience is to bring stakeholders together to form a single unit as one unified force to address climate resilience through financing. So that means bringing together stakeholders that have one role or the other to play in the water sector to attract public and private finance into the water sector. And of course, if you compare the data that we have in the water sector in terms of private finance compared to what we have going on in other similar sectors like telecoms and power, what you realize is that there's a very huge gap, a very huge financing gap for the water sector. And if most of the climate-related challenges around the world are water related, then that means if we are able to solve the issue of water resilience, we will be on track in solving the issue of climate change largely. And a tangible and result-proven way of doing this is to attract financing into water resilience projects and then take those projects through series different stages of preparation, including pre-feasibility and feasibility assessments until deal closure. And not doing this alone as a development partner or doing this alone as a government sector partner, but doing this in such a platform, a partnership that brings together the different stakeholders, civil society organizations, the private sector actors, the government stakeholders, the investors and financiers, working together as a single team to address the issue of climate resilience. Next slide, please. Now, in order to be able to achieve this huge objective of the Resilient Water Accelerator of attracting public and private finance into water resilience projects, earlier this year, we conceptualized this whole idea of the Lagos Water Partnership. And just on the 9th of July, the partnership was officially inaugurated in Lagos. And what is the Lagos Water Partnership? The LWP is a platform that has been designed to lead the development and delivery of an investment vision for Lagos water security. This is a platform that brings together the different stakeholders that have been identified to have one role or the other to play in the water sector to form a single team with a single agenda of improving water resilience in Lagos. The objective, the first objective is to coordinate the investment in the water resources sector, which means identifying projects that we think are top priority that can attract investment, and then working together to develop those projects, engage with investors until the deals are closed and the project implementation begins. And the second objective is to build a consensus on priorities and common framework for improving the Lagos water sector. Over the years, what we've realized in Lagos State, especially through the CWRA process that my colleagues talked about earlier, is that decisions in the water sector are made at the top level without thorough consideration of what the actual challenges are within the local communities, or what are the concerns of investors and financiers if they want to consider a water project bankable. So in order to address this challenge, the Lagos Water Partnership will also build that kind of consensus where stakeholders come together to inform the kinds of decisions that are being made in the water sector. And the third objective is to build an evidence-based and targeted capacity and systems to attract large-scale investment in the water sector. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, while we're still trying to upload the next slide, the Lagos Water Partnership is divided into 3 broad tiers. We have the technical committee, that's the 3rd tier. We have the steering committee, which is the 2nd tier, and then we have the executive council, which is the 1st tier. And this broadly how it works. The technical committee, which is the 3rd tier, brings together technical level representatives from the different partners that are members of the partnership. That includes financiers and investors, government sector stakeholders, civil society organizations, academic institutions, and the rest of them. So the technical committee brings together technical level representatives from these various institutions to contribute technically into projects that are being identified, developing financial model and revenue generating structures for the different models that are being identified, contribute to policy decisions, contribute to sector development plans, and the rest. And the decisions that are made at the technical committee are then communicated to the steering committee, which is the 2nd tier. And the steering committee brings together management level representatives from the same institutions. So at the technical committee, you have technical level representatives, but at the steering committee, you have management level representatives. You have CEOs and board directors at the steering committee, and their duty is to review what comes out of the technical committee, to review it and make sure it aligns with the plans and priorities of the state government, make a final decision based on that, and then communicate that to the 1st tier, which is the Executive Council. Now, this Executive Council is manned by the Lagos State Governor, the highest political representation of Lagos State. It's at this level that the final decisions are now made on those projects, on policy decisions, and other issues in the water sector. The technical committee, which is the third tier that I mentioned earlier, contains about 4 working groups, which is the division is based on the interest and expertise of the different members. We have the finance working group that deal with development of financial models and revenue structures for projects. We have the regulation working group, project mobilization working group, and the sector development plans. Next slide, please. Next slide, thank you. Now, the Lagos Water Partnership is hosted by the Lagos State Government, and the Secretariat is hosted by the Lagos State Ministry of the Environment and Water Resources, where my colleague spoke about earlier. And they own the development, the progress of the Lagos Water Partnership. They own the communication, bringing together the different members so that the non-government members can, see that level of commitment and demonstration of willingness from the Lagos State Government to partner with the non-government actors in addressing the issues of climate and water resilience in Lagos. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for your time. I'll hand over to Kirsten and Rashid. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to all of our speakers that have kind of explored the entire CWRA process and the work that we've been doing with the Resilient Water Accelerator in Lagos. So it would be great if we could get some questions for our speakers. So if you have a question, please feel free to put it into the chat here or follow the Menti link, which you should be able to see in the bottom left of the screen, or here we go, right in the middle of the screen. I think we'll start with Philip because we've had quite an interesting one through on the chat, which is, what plans do you have in partnering with social entrepreneurs in providing access to clean water in education sector, particularly government state schools in the primary and secondary level? Many students avoid eating breakfast or lunch because they don't want to have to use toilets that have no running water. The girl child suffers especially during their menstrual cycles. Clearly, no access to running water and proper sanitation does not allow for a conducive environment for learning. So it would be great if you could talk a bit around creating investable projects in Lagos, and especially kind of focusing on toilets and running water.
Thank you very much. Yes. When we launched the Lagos Water Partnership on the 9th of July, what we did was we engaged with several social entrepreneurs, several civil society organizations, several investors and financiers and private sector partners, community associations to come together and become members of the partnership so that we can begin to understand the challenges that are being faced at the local level, just like what we are talking about here was being asked here. And based on that, those members now are beginning to let us know what the challenges are at the local level, not just in schools, government and private schools, but even in religious institutions, even within the structures that is available within the communities and villages in Lagos State. And that information is not informing the development and the identification and development of projects in Lagos State. An example is a particular project we call the 250 modern toilet facility project, which is looking at providing a safe modern toilet facility in at least 25 communities in Lagos State that will be accessible to students and pupils in the educational institutions, but also to also toilet facilities that are gender friendly. And it's not just accessible, but also health-wise for use for both the male and female gender. And now we are developing that project. We are communicating with the communities and at the same time communicating with investors and social entrepreneurs to begin to understand what are the recent innovations in toilet facility development, what are the issues around bankability, bring all of that together to develop an efficient project that can be implemented in Lagos. So we always encourage other social entrepreneurs that have not been able to reach out to us. We have the OurWater website, which I think is in one of the slides, but you can also check us out. You can check us out through the Lagos State Ministry of Environment and Water Resources, where the Secretariat is hosted, and you can be a member of the partnership so that we can begin to also understand from your expertise, what can we do to improve water resilience in Lagos? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip. And it would be great to build on that So maybe we could bring in Kunli. So you spoke a lot about how kind of we need to make sure that we're talking to stakeholders and really understanding what people on the ground need. Kunli, how would you say that water security programs can design in stakeholders and make sure that they're involved at every stage in the process?
Thanks, Kirsten. And I think that's a really good question that was posed in terms of how these challenges actually affect the individuals and the citizens of the state. And you could see the question was talking about the difficulties that girls face. And so you might just notice they're not in school, but in actual fact, the root cause is the absence of water. And I think so one of the key things, of course, is that in anything that's going to be done, it's absolutely essential that all the stakeholders are brought in. And not only that, I think it's a case of also making sure that it's not just at the beginning or at the end, but all the way through in the various processes that go along. So in the planning, in the implementation, in the financing, and also making sure that they actually remain robust and continue. I will say that it's an uphill task because, generally certainly in Nigeria, a lot more emphasis is put on things like energy and, things which are seen as more income yielding. Water, very few people do want to actually spend, and it's difficult to get all the stakeholders to understand the importance. But as you've asked, really, we need to make sure that everybody's brought around the table. And in fact, some of the CWRA initiatives involve these roundtable discussions and just making sure that it is a robust, evidence-based type of solution.
Thank you, Kunli. And I think, yeah, we can kind of build on that even further and try and understand a bit more about the role that the CWRA process plays in this. So maybe Nimot, could you speak to the role of stakeholders in the CWRA process and how we can enable them to influence water decisions in Lagos?
All right, thank you, Christina. I will do a write down on what Philip had earlier said, mentioning some of the stakeholders, and like I rightly mentioned, the support the benefits of the water tool that have been used to identify the various stakeholders. So one of the critical stakeholders that I will mention is the academia and the researchers. We've been used to conventional mode of managing and extracting water, but research the academia and university has really helped in terms of the way water can be managed in a more sustainable way. Also, the media and the journalists, they play an important role. For some areas where they had to reach areas, the vulnerables, doing advocacy of a type that they understand, not necessarily the one that all of us on this platform, we understand, but taking it to them in their nooks and crannies will really be very helpful in influencing water decisions in Lagos State. And considering the typography of Lagos, we'll be able to really go through the 5 processes, really understanding what the stakeholder wants, engaging with them, what's the peculiarity, going through each of the 5 processes will really help us to produce and provide a solution that actually meets individual needs, not a general one-size-fits-all. So that's one unique benefit of the CWRA in identifying processes, providing solutions that actually meet their needs, not a one-size-fits-all.
Thank you so much, Nimot. I think so. Yeah, we've spoken a lot about bringing stakeholders together, and we're kind of working towards this vision of something in Lagos. I've got a question for Omobalanle. Could you speak to us about what does a water resilient Lagos look like to you?
Thank you very much. The water resilient Lagos, from my own point of view, looks like, for all Lagos, people living in Lagos, to have a clean and safe water for everyone, for sanitation and hygiene. And secondly, to ensure that the vulnerable communities, all communities in particular, vulnerable communities, are protected from flood. They are flood and water, from flooding. Currently, we have 3 weather stations in Lagos. And so we now do a daily weather forecast to give, this weather informations when the rains are coming, when they expect to have heavy rains in Lagos, and when they expect to have low rains. We do that daily right now. The information is being passed across all social media, in particular at the local level. Yes. And then at present too, we have the construction of the primary drainage channels that is being taking place, and then also the silting, clearing of the primary and secondary drainage channels around the community. We all know that Lagos is a coastal city, and then Lagos has 70% water, and so the need to protect Lagos from the negative impact of climate change, which is flood, is ongoing, and efforts to do that are active. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we also have one additional person joining us on the panel, and this is Martin Schuler, who's our London Water Business Leader at Arup, and has been very involved in the CWRA process in Lagos. So Martin, how does the CWRA process do stakeholder mapping? How do you make sure you're identifying all of the key stakeholders in the city?
Yeah, thanks, Kirsten. It sort of builds on the points made earlier by the panelists. So I've been involved in over 20 or so CWRA initiatives across the globe, many of them in Africa. I think we've undertaken this type of work in 10 or so cities and their catchments and basins. And what we did when we designed the city water resilience approach is recognise the points that have been made earlier, how important it is to get everybody in the room to be inclusive, to make sure that everybody's voices are heard. So we designed a digital tool called OurWater, which allows us to map the key stakeholders, not just the usual key stakeholders who are involved in perhaps managing the water systems, but much more inclusive. And that's a transparent way of identifying those stakeholders because it's open and visible, and it's publishable. So it's a digital tool which builds organically. Users can come on and add other stakeholders that perhaps haven't been identified, and certainly picking up the vulnerable communities and having their voice heard. And that tool is called OurWater. It's free to use. If you'd like to use it or just want to see some of the work that's either done in Lagos or in other cities, you can log on. If you want to take that further and you might be based in another city, just contact one of the team. We can open a profile for you and you can start undertaking similar work. So it's very open, transparent, and participatory. And these are the core tenets of our work. And that only then can we actually really build that true resilience by having that inclusive, all those voices heard. So super proud of that. It's a very simple tool. It's very visual, but it also shows, as you saw earlier, that those connections and how important those connections are. And I think also, and it was touched on earlier by Nimot, is how important it is to understand underlaps and overlaps between those responsible bodies. So delving a little bit deeper into where perhaps certain areas are not being picked up by government agencies, and how does elements like WASH get picked up. So that's just one example, I think, of how a city water resilience approach, and it's got many other tools and attributes, but it makes it a little bit easier, but also very, very inclusive and transparent, which is important to do this type of work. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Martin. I think we've probably got time for one more question. So I'm going to direct this one to Philip. so we can hear a little bit more about the Lagos Water Partnership. So Philip, how could we use the Lagos Water Partnership to enable sustainable financing in the Lagos water sector and identify projects that are really investable?
Thank you very much, Kirsten. Yes, the Lagos Water Partnership being a platform that brings together the multi-stakeholders that have different roles and interests in the water sector. One thing it seeks to do is to understand what are the considerations of the different stakeholders and depending on their roles. So when we just came into Lagos last year, 2023, OurWater, one thing we got to understand is that the reason why investors and financiers do not consider water projects or take them as a priority is because first they think water projects are not bankable, and secondly they are not able to see the kind of data that they need to begin to measure the bankability of those projects. So now what the Lagos Water Partnership is doing is making sure that these investors and financiers are involved at the earliest stage of project identification and project preparation. So the concerns that they have around the lack of data is already being addressed from that early stage. So one of the projects that we're working on in Lagos State currently, for example, is the Dion Phase 2 water scheme project. And now we are asking questions from the investors. What will you want to see to consider a water supply, a municipal water supply project bankable? You know, and they are beginning to voice out concerns around the tariff structure, concerns around accountability, concerns around the other revenue generation means for the project, concerns around the financial model. Is it going to be debt equity? Is it going to be PPP? And those kinds of issues. And at this early stage of the project development, we are addressing those challenges already. So we are through the Lagos Water Partnership, the financiers and investors are sitting with the government partners, you know, in developing this project so that they are able to see the level of commitment from the government. They are able to see how these concerns that they have, how it can be addressed, and how they can also support, how the investors and financiers can also support in the project preparation processes to make these projects bankable. So this is the transformative instrument that the Lagos Water Partnership is using in bringing in investors into water resilience project development and attracting investment into these projects. And one thing to also mention is that the OurWater as an initiative, we are also a member of the Just Transition for Water Security, and which is a partnership that seeks to deploy an approach of triggering social, economic, and ecosystem resilience at scale. And we have other members in this partnership. We have the Water Tracker for National Climate Planning, and we have the Fair Water Footprints. And we are also learning from each other, you know, to be able to understand what's working in other similar cities around the world, what's working in Cape Town, what's working in Amsterdam, what's working in countries like Denmark, and how can we also take advantage of those kinds of lessons and deploy them in Lagos State to attract investment into water resilience projects. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Philip. So I think we haven't had any more questions through, so I'm going to hand over to Martin to give our kind of reflections and next steps for Lagos.
Thank you very much, Kirsten, and thank you very much to the panel. Very interesting conversation there. I've got that very difficult job at the end to sum up. You know, effectively 18 months, 2 years of work to get us to this point. These things are not easy to move a city along that journey towards water resilience, but it's super encouraging the progress that Lagos has made. So using some of those tools that we heard about earlier, the City Water Resilience approach, working very closely with the Resilient Water Accelerator, effectively hand in glove, looking at those bankable project opportunities that Philip touched on. So I think it's exciting where we are now. You'll see that picture there. It's a bit of a snapshot, but it shows you how many people need to be involved in this. It's not just ministries and consultants. We all need to get behind water resilience to move that forward. So for the benefits of communities, but also for the economy as well. So we're looking at water as that great connector that fires up economies and is a requirement for safe and inclusive communities. Next slide, please. So what's happening now? So we're partly through that process. There's a defined process that's been been used in 20+ cities that I mentioned earlier. And we're learning all the way. We're halfway through the 5-stage process that was mentioned earlier. And now we've brought on new friends, as Philip mentioned earlier, and we're now part of the Just Transitions for Water Security, which was launched only a few weeks ago by the UK's Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office. So I'm currently calling in from Stockholm, where there's where the World Water Week is happening, and there's a number of launches with the other parties, and there's 3 elements to that, as Philip alluded. But effectively, what you're doing is weaving strands together in terms of the policy, strategy, investment, which is required to actually fire up water security. And what we're doing on this program in Lagos now is moving into that phase where we're bringing on that investment and better understanding the resilience picture. And there was a number of key elements that I suppose they needed further work effectively for Lagos, and that's understandable. Every city that we work with has areas of improvement. And 1 or 2 of the key areas just to highlight were one around data. Now, data really provides that forward look in terms of resilience, but also gives a surety to the investment community. So understanding data requirements, how we best use that data and how we bring it into the decision-making process, making it more obvious and transparent, and then encouraging both the public and private investment channels to get behind water resilience. So we're building that data platform. We're continuing our work of engagement, and we're also looking at the enabling environment. So we're understanding perhaps where things perhaps could be perceived as barriers that need to be addressed. So the enabling environment is super important. You can't move forward with water resilience unless you have the right governance and the right enabling environment. And again, that's not just for Lagos, it's anywhere in the world. So we're moving that forward. If you're listening to this, please come along, be part of that journey. It's a really exciting journey that we're all on. Next slide, please. And here's some of those organizations I mentioned earlier. This is a real collective action, a real collective initiative, and more organizations are coming on stream. So we've now got the FCDO and that investment behind us as well, and pushing along for Lagos and wider into Nigeria. So we're also looking at other things like the nationally determined contributions through the resilience water tracker, and we're also looking at fair water footprints as well. So that's bringing in additional resources into that journey for water resilience. Next slide. I'm just going to finish now, really just a few thanks to all our presenters, but also equally important, if you get a chance to review some of these resources, they're all available online. We are keen to publish all our materials as part of that inclusive and transparent way that we do our business. So all the reports are publicly available. Some selections available there. So if you pick up them, there are other resources that are coming on stream. But Lagos City Characterisation Report provided us that key baseline. So really understanding where Lagos is currently in terms of its water resilience journey and how it needs to move forward. And then there's a very short video which shows you those processes, those 5 steps for the city water resilience approach. So get involved. We need everybody, it's a collective action to move Lagos through into that resilient future for communities and the economy that it just deserves. So I'll leave it there, and I'll thank our presenters, and I'll hand back to Kirsten and Rashid.
Yep. Thank you so much, Martin, for that great kind of summary of what everyone spoke about and what's going to happen next in Lagos. So it's very exciting. That brings our session to a close. So thanks to everyone that's attended. And yeah, we hope you get in touch and get involved in the Lagos resilience journey. Thank you to all our speakers as well. And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.